WESN.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Good to see you. Let's just lead into this discussion with some of what was reported in the Express newspaper on Monday, December 26, 2022. That's just months ago. The festive solar lights that went up at the National Trust's headquarters at Millfleur and Queenspark West in Port of Spain brought solar energy into the traditional mix of Christmas lighting options. In a country that has enjoyed the benefit of subsidized electricity fueled by natural gas, solar energy has had a tough time breaking through the popular imagination until now. It has been more than 50 years since solar energy was put on the regional agenda by the late Professor Oliver Headley, advocate for renewable energy, pioneer of solar heating and crop drying, and architect of the region's first power grid solar system at Harrison's Cave in Barbados. Here in Trinidad and Tobago, more than 30 years ago, Dr. Indra Haraksingh took on the challenge of promoting solar energy to a population bred on low-cost electricity. Her natural convection flat-plate collector solar cooker, using coconut oil as the heat transfer fuel and heat storage medium, received global acclaim with the Outstanding Scientist Award for the World Renewable Energy Congress in Cologne, Germany. However, pioneers like Dr. Headley and Dr. Haraksingh were swimming against the popular tide at the time. Well, Dr. Indra Haraksingh is a lecturer at the University of the West Indies in physics, but she focuses on renewable energy. She's our guest for this edition of the program. Good to see you, ma'am.
Thank you, Andy.
All right, but thanks for coming on. Let's go back 30 years ago when you did that. Talk about what the environment was then, even though 20 years before that, Dr. Headley had done something to try and sort of jog us in the area that we must be going now. What was it like 30 years ago?
Yeah, those were the very early days, and you really felt that you were knocking your head against a stone wall. The days of Professor Headley, entrepreneurs like Ian Boone from DC Power Systems Limited, those were some of the first people I had interacted with, and there were many others as well. And that's when we started the Trinidad and Tobago Solar Energy Society, mainly for the purpose of sensitization of the public and training, etc. So those initiatives were really very important in helping to pave the way for the renewable energy movement here in Trinidad and Tobago. We met on a regular basis, we had discussions. We also spoke with government officials.
Yeah, so you were ahead of the time at that time. What was the situation now? What would you say is the distance we have traveled or not traveled where we should have between then and now?
Yeah, definitely we have made progress. I would say those initiatives by me and by the others have been very significant. And yes, they were ahead of the national game in some ways. We were actually doing work on the ground, and I think that's what helped to make that push. Students were getting involved, and we were able to disseminate knowledge, do some training. And as I said, we were also consulting with those in power, so we actually had some meetings at that time with them.
So if you were swimming against the tide, then where are you now in terms of being in the ocean?
Where are we now? Yeah, I would say that we have made progress. We have done some initiatives which definitely will be suitable for the transition to clean energy. Some of the things that accounted for that and that are helping us where we are today is collaboration with international and regional organizations such as the World Renewable Energy Network, the International Solar Energy Society, etc. Those helped me to become more aware of global trends, and consequently I wanted to introduce such measures on the national front. And yes, I am just one individual in the whole sea of things. But we have made progress. I have worked with the government on different initiatives, and we can talk about that in a while. We are not where we should be yet, but we are getting there.
And what stands in the way, would you say?
Yeah. So you were talking about spinning against the popular tide, and I can talk a little bit about that and say what actually got in the way.
Go ahead.
So against the popular tide means that we did have problems. We did have hindrances. So the popular tide now is the general acceptance that we as citizens must make adjustments in our everyday lives to ensure that we do not continue to endanger our earth. We must embrace energy efficiency and renewable energy measures, in particular for power generation, and minimize the use of fossil fuels producing the dangerous greenhouse gases which are detrimental not only to our environment, to our own existence, and cause in the transition to low carbon. The low cost of electricity here in Trinidad and Tobago is largely the factor which has not given us that big push to move forward. But we do have some things on the ground at the moment, and I will speak about that as we go along.
Yeah, all right. So you raise the issue. Sometimes it's an elephant in the room in these discussions now about the cost of energy, because we're seeing what is happening with the recommendations of the RIC and how there's massive pushback on that. You think that is a matter that has to be addressed in the way that it seems that the authorities want to address it? We simply have to raise the rates, irrespective of what are the claims about the impact on people's pockets?
You were breaking up. I missed part of what you said. I'm sorry, Andy.
Where are you on the issue about the attempts to raise the rates, given what is being said about the impact on people's pockets? You think that that has to happen to put this understanding about our need to move to renewable energy in a way that is faster?
Yeah. We have to move because of the whole concept of global warming, and there were some things that we had done on top of that, and they were built on top of that, and that gives us a greater sense of security. We have had national programs and other institutional programs which were aimed at sensitizing the general public, but more so building capacities so we have our own expertise here to help build our nation in this regard. Very often when we need help, we have to bring in an expert from abroad. So we were trying to combat that problem, and people do take advantage of that. Some of the measures taken, the working committee energy at the governmental level through the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. So that was one of the initiatives that we had taken from the government level, and we worked to ensure that people were able to break some of these barriers that were hindering the movement to renewable energy. There was also a renewable energy committee of the UWI. So I have been a member of these organizations. Training and capacity building measures this is one of the things that we have tried to focus on a lot, especially here at the UWI. Some years ago, I developed the Masters in Renewable Energy Technology here, and it's being delivered at this time since 2013. And we also have increased MPhil and PhD programs where we are training people so that we can fight against those problems that we have initially had. We also have done training for other stakeholders like the hotel and agriculture sectors. And I have done a fair amount of training, not only in Trinidad, but throughout the Caribbean region in this regard. I hope I've answered your question because I was...
Yeah, so I wanted to come to where it says in the report in the paper here that in ratifying the Paris Agreement a couple of years ago, Trinidad and Tobago officially committed the country to reducing carbon emissions in the top 3 emitting sectors: industry, power generation, and transport. Is it too early to ask for some kind of a report card about as to how we go about that, taking into account the discussions now about the proposals to increase electricity rates as part of that?
Yeah. So the three sectors that I believe you are referring to are industry, power generation, and transport.
Yes.
And the question is, have we met those commitments? So I have to mention that TNT was one of the first countries to develop an implementation plan to achieve its nationally determined contribution. And that details the country's commitment to the Paris Agreement and to the low carbon development. This is coming from the government of Trinidad and Tobago in 2019. So while we are on our way, we have not yet met those commitments. But for information, all is not lost at all because we have made strides. Trinidad and Tobago has committed to achieving 30% of renewable energy generation by 2030 and to reduce carbon emissions in its power generation, transport, and industry sectors by 15% under this Paris Agreement.
Yeah, so that's what the report says here. In essence, TNT's carbon reduction strategy aims to reduce carbon emissions by an overall 15% in these sectors while replacing 10% of TNT's natural gas-powered electricity with renewable energy. What do you see? Yeah, what do you see when you look through the lenses made for these as to where we are?
I didn't get the question.
Yeah. What do you see when you look through those lenses? As to where we are on that road?
Yeah, I think we are far from achieving that at the moment. And there have been many reasons for that. I would definitely say that we are on the right track. And I mentioned reasons why we have been slower than other countries on the uptake. But we are, I would say, not even 50% close to where we are supposed to be, Andy.
We're not halfway there as we should be.
I would say not even halfway there, but the intentions are there and there are things that are being put in place to make that happen.
What do you think is holding us back? Is there a lack of will? What is the resources? What are some of the things that probably can't be discounted?
I don't think we can say it's lack of resources, because if we consider ourselves against the rest of the Caribbean, we are perhaps the most well off. So I don't quite think it's the resources. I mean, we have been blessed with natural resources, oil and gas. And I think that may be part of the problem, because we have for so long had cheap electricity. And therefore, if we were to start pushing the renewables, we have to inject extra capital. And that would perhaps increase the cost of electricity for us. But it's a temporary move and it's a necessary move if we are to go in that direction. We cannot measure the dangers that we have done to our environment. And when we are considering cost, that also must be factored in. So the cost has to be not just the cost of the energy, but the cost of repairing the damages that we have done to our environment.
Yeah, I want to make a comparison, because probably 10 years ago, there were parts of Barbados, entire communities, it seemed, in Barbados that had gone solar, and people were asking, well, where are we and what's been happening?
Yes. What has really made Barbados take off by leaps and bounds? In the early 70s, the Tom Adams government, they were very much interested. In fact, he himself wanted some devices placed on his home. And not that it has to be personal, but he was very much interested in that. And the government at that time offered many very good incentives for the dissemination of solar devices and so on. And the population took to that because they had two things. The main thing is that their cost of electricity is definitely higher than us. And the other thing is the excellent incentives that they have actually gotten over the years. That really created the big push in Barbados.
Yeah.
And one, too, is that they are not as industrialized as us. So that has helped.
Yeah, I meant it was going to prompt the question because it's an issue that comes up from time to time. It's been coming up about how where we are in terms of industrialization, in terms of energy sort of provisioning. It's a blessing and a curse at the same time.
It's a blessing and a curse at the same time, yes. But it has moved us forward, and it has been of tremendous benefit to us here in Trinidad and Tobago. So there's no question that we should not have embraced it. It's just that we have to do it in tandem with clean energy transition as well.
Yeah. The story says that for Trinidad and Tobago, 2022 has been a watershed year in the climate change agenda because after decades of being taken up by a smattering of environmentally aware individuals and entities in remote areas unsurfaced by tea and tech, solar is beginning to pick up momentum. And they talk about the fact that in 2015, the Trinidad and Tobago government adopted the National Carbon Reduction Strategy, and state-owned National Energy, the Ministry of Energy, and the University of Trinidad and Tobago partnered in what is called building a 732 square foot fully solar powered model house for a family of 4 to 5 at UTT's Point Lisas campus. To what extent that kind of incentive is moving us in the right direction, is picking up steam, is getting support?
That definitely is a big move for us. It definitely is going to move us forward. And as you see, solar is beginning to pick up momentum, which means we are actually on the road to less dependence on fossil fuels. So all initiatives like that one, definitely we have to embrace them. And the good thing about those as well is that they can serve as showpieces for future development in our country.
I thought you were going to say something else.
Yeah, I was just going to say something else. Yeah. One of the problems I'm facing is that your questions are coming across a little bit garbled because of I don't know, the audio. So I would just speak, if I may.
Yes.
So I would say, indeed, solar is beginning to pick up. We are on the road to less dependence on fossil fuels. And the big question that we have, and in relation to other countries as well, is by how much? How much? Our situation here is unique, as we have spoken about, and we have been fortunate with respect to our fossil fuel reserves. We have benefited immensely from that. That has also been the main reason for our slow transition to clean energy. But I want to go on to say there has been also another consequence of that. We could say that serious energy efficiency measures have not been seen as a matter of urgency in our country because our energy costs have been so low. And this is one of the areas that we must focus on. We have to also appreciate that the economic aspects are just one side of the coin. We also have to look at the disastrous effects on the environment, which we all need to be mindful of.
And what is the evidence of that? What can you point to some of the evidence of that disastrous effect of the use and the abundant use of fossil fuel energy in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yeah, over the years, Andy, it's not something that's so tangible, that's easy to see. It's something that you need to follow over the years. For instance, in terms of global warming, Trinidad and Tobago has already seen a rise of 0.8 degrees centigrade over the last years. And that is definitely a serious consequence. That is one of the main things. So the whole idea of the temperature changing is one thing, but also there are other things that we need to take charge of. Some with respect to some of the problems. So we can see effects, rainfall effects, for instance. We have had changes in our rainfall, changes in our local temperature, changes in sea level rise, and all of those are measurable, but measurable over a number of years. It's not easy. One has to be following the trend or read the reports to see what has actually happened over the time. You cannot go from day to day and just watch and say, this is what has happened. But what we as common people can see is especially changes in the weather patterns. And that is something which is not good. That is something which is not good.
Yeah, you say
that's a reflection of the global changes.
And you say that, right? You say that we have experienced a 0.8% increase in temperatures over a period of time. And what are some of these specific sort of weakness points with that continues? What would we face? We'll face some further rises in sea levels, and that will create further disaster on seashores and more.
Yes, like flooding.
Yeah.
And intense flooding in some areas, and that is one of the consequences of the sea level rise. As I say, I think what we need to do is education programs, Andy, because the common person doesn't see the day-to-day changes. So we really need to educate and sensitize persons about that as a matter of urgency, actually.
How do you do that? Is it there's a requirement for talking about and teaching these things in school, in primary school, in secondary school?
Yes, I think that there has been some change to the syllabus even in primary and secondary schools to incorporate a little bit of energy. Maybe we have to do it in a more forceful manner, and I think having devices and having the installations that we are hoping to have, like from the 3 initiatives, I think those are things, when people see it in action, I think people tend to embrace it a little bit more. So once we get those, I would recommend school visits to those places, so students from the young age will start beginning to think along those lines. We were not trained, or we were not brought up to think about those little measures that we all need to take. I mean, we have to admit that we have had a lot of wastage here in Trinidad and Tobago. And wastage of any kind, food, energy, whatever it is just not good. It does not lead to sustainability. So it's something that we need to train our young children, not just when they reach university level, but when they start at primary school. We need to train them from that level.
Yeah. And there must be some evidence that those things are being taken on board seriously. And that is not the case now?
As I said, there were some initiatives. I'm aware that there have been some initiatives in the schools. I would say that they are perhaps not enough, because even when I served on the Renewable Energy Committee of Trinidad and Tobago, we did some stuff with schools. We dealt with installations of solar distillation units, and we talked about other things as well. But it's not so easy, so straightforward. It has to start with a policy, with a plan, and we have to incorporate that. Now, teachers are also under pressure, and teachers, because they themselves have not been trained in this area, they hesitate. They have a reservation about trying to teach it and trying to tell students what they should be doing. So it's a whole set of dynamics that need to be taken into account. One of the things we need to focus on is training of teachers. And our government here, through the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, they started an initiative in 2012 where we trained teachers on renewable energy technologies. It was an excellent workshop. It ran over several days, and we had more than 80 teachers in that program. There was a second phase that was planned, but I think we still have to do that. I was one of the facilitators for that workshop, and I think the teachers were really very happy. We need to do a little bit more of that. So start with the teachers so they can help the students, because working with the students alone, and of course, reaching out to thousands and thousands of students is not easy. So if we can do it through the teachers, that would help.
You think that again, that is another example of how in many respects in our public administration, we have this start and stop approach to dealing with matters that we must deal with. And you think this sort of awareness building has as well fallen prey to that?
I missed that point.
So something like this, with the kind of urgency that we should be moving forward on this question, on the climate question, so that has fallen prey to what probably is part of our national public administration characteristic of starting and stopping.
In the same workshop I'm telling you for teachers, there was, all the funds were in place for it. We were there to deliver. And the second phase has not come off as yet. And that is really quite sad. I'm sorry that happened, because the teachers were very, very excited. And it was new to a lot of them, because when they would have gone to university, they would not necessarily have done any work in this area. So they were happy for this new information that they were getting. And also, I mean, in continuing this trend, we can actually help teachers on ways to deliver this to students. We can develop some programs to help teachers deliver this.
Now, I want to ask you, it's going back to one of the questions earlier on, what is your story, what is your narrative about how you would talk with people who are opposed to any notion of the increase in electricity rates? If you put it in the context of the necessity to do that in order to encourage better use of electricity and then move away from the electricity generation as we know it to where we should be if we want to address this question of the climate?
We need to talk to different stakeholders. We definitely need to be in close communication with government officials on this. We also need to work with the state agencies in terms of getting them on board. And I know TNTech has been doing stuff, and they are willing to continue, but work continues, and sometimes new initiatives, they can't find time for it. But this is something that we need to do. As I said, we also need to work with even our students, they need to be trained in this regard. And on top of all of that, sensitizing the general public, building capacity to get our own expertise, all of those things need to be put in place.
So just see if you could put in a context. The story talks about the fact that, over the 5 months ending sometime in December, the government or the country took 3 key solar initiatives. One was the salt turning of the solar park at Piarco International Airport. That was in July. The commissioning of the first 12 community-based solar installations in selected public utilities and remote communities, and the signing ceremony for our utility-scale solar PV project in Brecon Castle and Orange Grove.
I tried to address a little bit of that before, because Trinidad and Tobago, as I said, was one of the first countries to develop that implementation plan for achieving its nationally determined contribution, which details the country's commitment to the Paris Agreement and low carbon development. But there are other things that we need to do. There are other things that we need to do, and some of that is actually talking to people. Talking to the big stakeholders is one thing. Public sector and private sector personnel need to work together with government and need to work together also with academia. So when we try to encourage, say, our students, our friends, our associates as to what they must do individually to contribute to where we have to go, I would say we have a long way to go to reach where we need to be. We must all take responsibility for our actions and for getting there. And we also must be mindful of wastage in all spheres, and we must exercise, very importantly, energy efficiency measures. There should be some penalty if we go against this, for instance, in our everyday lives. We should have to pay for it. By money, we should have to pay for it somehow, and then we would feel the need to do it. Moreover, for young people in particular, if they are embarking on things like, they graduate, they go off to build their own homes, construction, they should really, from there on, start to incorporate renewable energy technologies such as rooftop solar water heating systems, and so as part of their house. When you do it as part of the initial establishment, you don't really feel that cost. When you come after building your house and you have to put up a system on your rooftop, then you feel the $10,000 or the $20,000. It's hard to put out. So it's nice to do it at the start. A long time ago, I had spoken about the importance of incorporating solar systems on new construction sites, and I'm talking about government housing schemes, etc. That is one place where the government should definitely move. You're building a housing scheme in whichever area, make sure all of them have a solar water heater, for instance. We can move slowly. We also can incorporate some solar photovoltaics for power generation, but at least put a solar water heater. Why should we be using electricity to heat water when we have so much energy coming from the sun?
All right.
And a solar water heater is maybe a little bit more expensive than an electric water heater. But if you look after, you pay back for that in a few years.
Yeah.
And after that, it's all free energy. So I think that's something we need to think about.
All right. Well, thank you very much for rounding it off that way. Dr. Indra Haraksingh, lecturer in physics at the University of the West Indies, but renewable energy advocate. Thank you very much.
And I gather we have run out of time because I had a couple of recommendations that I would have liked to mention, but
we could speak to it subsequently. We will get you back.
Very quickly, some other important recommendations that I've thought about.
Go ahead.
Some of these are coming from the government. Promotion of green initiatives and our work environment, and that's very important. If managers and so insist that we do certain things, I think that would help. Sensitization workshops for leaders and managers to achieve that initial push, because many of them don't know themselves, so they can't instill that in their workplace. In the agriculture sector, for instance, we can implement what is known as agrivoltaics. We'll talk about that another time. And the $25,000 rebate for farmers using renewables, that's coming from the government green initiatives statement that they had made some time ago. Also, the low carbon hydrogen industry, either green or blue hydrogen, for being a carbon neutral alternative that can be used as feedstock for the petrochemical production, and it can be a very good source of revenue for the government. We are talking about feed-in tariffs and net metering policies for a long time. We don't have them in place yet, and that is one thing that will encourage the common person, the common man, to start instituting some renewable energy systems on their home. And I close now. The national renewable energy policy is a must. We must have that policy which will guide us to move forward. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Well, a lot for those who are interested and those who've been watching and those who will watch to chew on and to take up from. But thank you very much, Dr. Indra Haraksingh.
You're very welcome, Andy. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this.
Thank you very much. Well, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
WESN.
I'm Keaton Shaw, and we are WESN, the content capital.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andy.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return?